So then moving on from the segment, Mike, I have a question for you about a particular trade. Might ring a bell. Yu Darvish from the Chicago Cubs to the San Diego Padres, and I was just you're gloating in your sweep right now. So I just wanted to know, what are your thoughts in May after this trade of Yu Darvish and Victor Caratini for Zach Davies and a handful of prospects?
Well, I always appreciate you trying to knock down my ego, Matt. So great job with that, riding high today. And I think my thoughts on the trade are the same that they were at the time of the trade. Stupid. Like I don't want to, I don't want to say anything bad about the Cubs when they've been playing so good, but it was a stupid trade, especially when you look at just how good the Cubs have been lately. If they could have kept Darvish or even got something back from like quality players, I think, oh my God, they would be so much better, because our starting pitching is probably the weak spot on this team right now. So if we could have obviously a guy like Darvish back, that would be amazing. But thanks for reminding me, of course. And I still think it's a stupid trade.
I'm glad you still think that way. I still think that way too. On the Cubs part, not ours. but
Yep.
this Darvish trade's absolutely helped us, especially considering Blake Snell has struggled mightily. Chris Paddock has had his struggles. The number 5 spot in our rotation started with Adrian Morejon. He ended up needing Tommy John, and then went to Ryan Weathers, who ended up throwing like maybe 19 pitches in one inning because of an injury. And then Dinelson Lamet got hurt at another point, and now they're kind of piggybacking. So maybe other than Joe Musgrove, the one constant in our rotation has been Yu Darvish. And one of my favorite pitchers last year was absolutely Zach Davies. We talked a lot about Zach Davies on the podcast on Spotify. But one thing that kind of bothered me about Zach Davies was he was a player that could get you a solid ERA and kind of get you to the playoffs. But he was never going to be that, oh man, this guy needs to go game 7. He was never going to win you, a big time playoff game. Whereas Yu Darvish, he's going to do that. Hopefully we see him do that this year. So that was my biggest takeaway from that trade. I love that trade right now. Even Victor Caratini has been, he was a slept on part of that trade.
Yeah. 100%.
We kind of just, and we kind of just thought of him as, he's kind of just Darvish's personal catcher. But he's come up in a lot of clutch moments, and this has been a good trade.
Victor Caratini. I was going to bring him up. I was going to ask you, Mike, because I was listening to like a recap of the trade, and this was from the summer, or I guess the winter, when the trade happened, and it was from a Cubs fan, and they were basically like, throwing away Victor Caratini, whatever. And I was like, man, imagine trying to say that now. Like, that is because for the Padres especially, and I know you like him, but for the Padres especially, he's been the guy that's been behind the plate most of the days. He's been he's pretty much been the starting catcher amid Austin Nola's injuries. But what was your thought about losing him? Because I mean, he was always really good on the Cubs as well.
Well, I think the trade just for Yu Darvish would have been great, but then you just kind of throw in Victor Caratini. Now I get the fact that we have Wilson Contreras, who's kind of our everyday catcher. He catches probably 90% of our games, and I totally agree with that. I'm not saying that Caratini is better than Contreras, but I think that we could have gotten a little more value for Contreras. I think he's a solid catcher, plays good defense. Obviously, he's got good connections with Yu Darvish. Was his personal? I think he was Darvish's catcher last year for the most part. But I just thought it was stupid to just throw in Caratini, a solid bat, a guy that you could have pinch hit and whatever. I just thought it was very stupid. People again, like you said, they just said, "Oh yeah, whatever, it's Caratini." I was like, he's a good player. Like, they've gotten a really good player and a good player for little to nothing. So, was even more upset when I heard that Caratini was part of it, obviously.
Yeah. So far, we really like Caratini. Victor Clutchatini is what we started calling him.
Clutchatini.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The guy's been, a great catcher all year. He's come up in a lot of big spots and come through. And he's been called some amazing games for Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, Chris Paddock. So he's doing really well behind the plate as well. And I think that needs to go recognized by the whole fan base, because it's really hard. Catching is
very hard.
So hard. And especially to call a guy that throws 9,000 pitches in Yu Darvish. That's a tough thing to do. So a lot of credit to Victor Caratini. Loving this trade so far. Hopefully it stays that way throughout the season.
Did Caratini catch the no-hitter?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, of course he did. Yep. Nice.
he calls games really well.
Yeah, he
and
does.
also, if for the Padres, if you reverse it a year with Austin Hedges and Francisco Mejia catching, and I know Austin Hedges is known as a great catcher, but it did not feel like he called the games as well as a guy like Caratini does, and even Nola for that matter, because we're not talking about him today. But I don't know. Overall, this trade, I think for the Padres, this was an awesome trade.
Yep.
For your Cubbies' sake, hopefully the prospects, their hits. Hopefully at least one of them is a big leaguer. I know they're not like any huge prospects, but I mean a lot of it maybe at the end of the day, it'll be to keep a guy like Chris Bryant. That's why they moved on from Yu Darvish's salary. So time will tell. It might make more sense for the Cubs down the road if we look at it.
Yeah. I honestly think that's what it was. Just forecasting of we've got all these guys on the verge of contracts. Javi, KB, Rizzo is going to be an issue down the line. So I think they picked and they decided, but I still think they could have gotten more for Darvish. I think they just kind of gave him away. I understand wanting to move on, but I think they could have gotten more. And that's the upsetting part. Not that he was traded, just for what he got.
Well, the one thing I'm kind of confused about is why didn't they wait till the deadline? Like if they would have done that, it would have had all the COVID implications on the salary. I mean, it still would, but not to the extent that it did.
Right.
And that's why teams weren't trading. Like it was so quiet, and then the Padres made a few trades, and that was like all that happened for like 2 months.
Snell and Darvish in like 3 days or something.
No, in like this, it was the same day, I believe, and then Musgrove was a couple days later. So it was just like back to back to back, and then it's like, okay, this is the front end of the rotation. So definitely big. But had to mess with you a little bit, Mike, because
it's
the Cubs won, so had to get something back.
I'll be better.
All right, everyone. Well, this is Mike. Hopefully he'll be back on the show. Maybe if you guys like him, but we'll see how that goes.
Probably not.
But yeah, thanks everyone. And then we're going to start talking about the Mets right here in just a second.